Evening everyone, it's Liz again, and today we're doing part 4 of our introduction to R, and today we're going to take a further look at some of the different types of plots that we can use. So the first one we're going to start with is the simple base package for plots. This comes with R, you don't need to do anything special, and it's the one that we have seen in my previous demonstrations. The second one that we're going to look at is going to be Plotly, the third one being ggplot2, and then we're going to look at merging the two and using ggplotly. So I know that seems a lot at the moment, but we'll take a quick look at each one and walk through them. Now Plotly and ggplot2 are packages, and again, if you haven't already got these installed, you will need to go to Packages, Install and search for them. So it's Plotly and ggplot2 that you'll need to find. And I've added them to my library list at the top of my user interface. So what I've done is I have already added additional plots to my user interface. So previously, if you've seen my previous videos, you will have seen this one where we added a column and a box, and we put our plot inside there, and it was our disk plot. So I've simply added 3 more here, and this is going to give us a grid layout with each of these assigned its own little box. And we can take a quick look. So here we are. So this one at the top left is our base plot, and the one that we have seen previously. This is our Plotly plot. This one is our ggplot2 plot, and this is our ggplot using Plotly, so ggplotly. So what you'll notice is there are ever so slight differences. I've tried to keep the code in the server as simple as possible, so not giving it an awful lot of information, so that we can kind of see how the most basic look to these comes out at. So you'll see that base in this particular instance already has our titles for frequency, for x, and our histogram of x. No titles whatsoever for Plotly. We have titles on our x and y axis, but no main title for ggplot2. And ggplotly, again, is exactly the same in that we have our x and our y, but no main title. Some of the other major differences you'll notice are the default settings for the background colour, for the lines, and then we also have whether or not they are interactive. So for starters, for the base and ggplot, you'll see there is no interactivity with these plots. They are simply static images. For Plotly and ggplotly, you'll see that these are interactive. If you hover over them, it will give you a count, and it will give you the value of x, so you can get all of this information. And again, this is very similar, but there are some slight differences in the way that the data is displayed in Plotly and ggplotly. I'm going to be saying this a lot, and I'm going to get tongue-tied, so I apologise now if I do. So we can zoom in to certain areas, double click, zoom back out. We can do that with this one as well. We can take download pictures, we can zoom in, zoom out, reset our axes. So it just gives us that little bit more flexibility. There are some things with ggplotly that don't work particularly well. You try and write something in the syntax for ggplot and then convert it, and it just does not work. So it's just something to be aware of and to be careful of. And so sometimes I just scrap it and go straight to the Plotly syntax, and then it just works a lot better. So it's just something to be aware of. Although sometimes easier to do ggplot to ggplotly if you've already written the code, it might just be worth going straight to plotly. So now looking at those different server side of things, we've got our first one where we had our displot. We're using the faithful data, we organise our bins, and then drawing the histogram, we have X, we have our breaks as our bins, our colour is set to dark grey, and our border is white. So we've not really given it an awful lot of information, and yet we still managed to get these titles already plotted for us, and we didn't do much with it. Let me try and put these half and half so that you maybe have a better view as to where we are. Okay. So we then have plotly. This requires the size to be given opposed to the names of the bins. So we're going to have our start, our end, and our size for the number of bins. Again, we are now telling it that we want a histogram. For our colours, we need to set out the marker that we're looking at. We're going to list the colour as dark grey, and then our line, we want a list of the colour and the width. If you miss the width out, you will not get any line. Just something to be aware of. Make sure you list both in the line. So as you can see, this is slightly more complex than what we had up here, and yet produces a very similar chart, but we don't have any of the titles, and we can add those in. Moving on to ggplot, we have our full data table and then what we're looking at, and that's what we set here. And then we tell it we want a histogram. We tell it that the outline is going to be white, our fill is going to be dark grey, and for bins, this is nice and simple. We just tell it the number of bins that we want. So that keeps it relatively simple, but you do get the grey background on here. You still haven't got titles, so they're all things that we would need to change to tidy up. If we wanted to, we could change this to any other colour. We could change where these lines are. So, they're all things we can tweak and everything else, but I wanted to try and do a direct comparison as much as I could. And then we're going to move on to ggplotly. So this is where we've taken that ggplot that we wrote up here, and we're just going to wrap it in ggplotly. That's all we're doing. And then this allows us to get this chart without having to say the start being an end and size of our bins, without having this complex marker terminology and listings. We've kept it quite simple with 3 inputs to it. So you can understand the benefit of using ggplotly. When you are doing something relatively simple, you maybe only want to do that, but it depends on where you want to then take it. And again, you can add and change your X and Y labels, put a title on, that's all fine, but they are at least already on here to an extent, whereas plotly, they aren't showing at all, so you would still need to add this onto here. You can see that all of these are linked, and they will all show now 7 bins. So that is still working as expected. So yeah, I think it just gives a little basic overview of what all the different plots are like, how they can be used. I mean, most of these you can change almost every aspect of. So this is sort of trying to show apples to apples, but if you wanted them to have bright pink backgrounds with blue bars, you can do, and you can update all the titles, you can update the ticks, you can update every little aspect realistically that you see here, to make it show how you want it to show. So yeah, one thing to kind of just note is the render here. If you are looking at a standard plot or ggplot, it's render plot. If you are wrapping it in ggplotly or render plotly, trying to render a plotly, then it is render plotly rather than render plot. And again, in the user interface, just to be careful that if it is a plotly output or a ggplotly output, it will be a plotly output rather than a plot output in the user interface. So just some little things to be careful of, to be aware of. It can just sort of throw you out a little bit if you're not aware of it. So yeah, let me know if you've got any questions, if there's anything else you'd like to see on this. And I'll post a few links along with the video so that you can have a look at the cheat sheets for these, just to give you a bit more of an idea to what you can do. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'll talk to you again soon.